Hey everybody, KC here. So today I am thrilled to present to you another in my series of author interviews. Longtime readers of Morning Newsbeat know that I was a huge fan of Robert B. Parker. I love the Spenser novels. I will quote Robert B. Parker every once in a while. And I am just as big a fan as the guy who picked up the Spenser novels after Robert P. Parker died in 2010. His name is Ace Atkins, who is a wonderful novelist in his own right. He's got a series featuring a Southern sheriff named Quinn Colson. There's been 10 books in that series. The new one, The Heathens, comes out, I think, in July. Now Ace Atkins has his newest in the Spenser series. It's called Robert B. Parker's Someone to Watch Over Me. And I think that he has done a marvelous job of taking over for Parker. He has captured the voice without being seeming like he's imitating him. He's done a really good job. He's added some flourishes. He's done some interesting things with it. But he captures the essence of the character. He respects the heritage. He respects the fans without pandering to them. And I think he's just terrific. So the other day I had a chance, the book is just out now, and I had a chance to catch up with Ace on Zoom. This is the third or fourth time I've had a chance to interview him. But as I think I mentioned in the interview, this is the first time we didn't do it in person over a beer. So I hope you'll enjoy it. So Ace Atkins, welcome to Morning Newsbeat.
Thanks, Kevin. This is an annual tradition, isn't it? We've done this every year for years.
Yeah, well, we've missed a couple of years, but but it was more fun when we do it with a beer in front of us. So that was always, again,
in New York City with a beer. I would kill to have something like that right now.
So my first question has to do with the first paragraph of your new book, Robert B. Parker's Someone to Watch Over Me, on sale now. And and it starts like this. It was early evening and early summer, and my bay window was cracked open above Berkeley Street. I had a half-eaten turkey sub on my desk, and the sports page from the Globe splayed out underneath. Dan Shaughnessy proclaimed Mookie Betts to be overrated. Did you make that up, or did he really say that Mookie Betts was overrated?
He did, and that was something, of course, when Mookie was, with the Sox, and so that was kind of a way of letting people know this is not happening during the pandemic.
Okay.
And that was trying to let
that works.
This is happening. Yeah, and he wrote that when Mookie was at the Sox, and so I was trying to let people know, yeah, this happened a few years ago.
Okay, all right, that's actually very good. I didn't
write that. Yeah, he did. He did write that though. Yes.
Okay, because that's hard to imagine anybody thinking Mookie. I'm a Mets fan. It's like, really.
He's not overrated, but he did write that. He did. I know Dan. I've done some events with him. He's a great guy, a great sports writer. But I think there was one time where the salary was so high. I think that's what he may have been a little bit tongue in cheek as well.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, I'd frankly pay him anything you want. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's not my money. So first of all, let me ask you a question. How are you doing during the pandemic? How has it affected, your writing, your production, it's obviously affected your publicity tour, research. How has it affected you?
Well, for a writer, I can't complain too much. The nature of being a novelist is being isolated and spending a great deal amount of time at home. And for me, that's pretty much the normal. That's pretty much the way things have been going on. But as far as production, I think it's only helped with production. It's really helped me. I don't take trips. I'm not on book tour right now. I can do promotion at home. So those are good things. But I do miss getting out and talking to people. I do miss the travel. And as you and I spoke about earlier, I miss just, visiting other places and getting on an airplane and traveling around the country.
Yeah. Although it's got to be helpful in terms of reaching lots of people. You can hit 5 cities in one day as opposed to hitting 5 cities in 6 days.
Yeah, but I do think that you can reach a lot more stores but there's nothing like, sitting down and meeting with fans, and especially something for a Spenser book, where there's there is such fandom for the character and so much love for this character. It's kind of like a family reunion of sorts. And so, I haven't, I like connecting with people in that way. I do miss that, and I hopefully that'll return someday.
So I love the new book. One of the things that it occurred to me in reading it was it struck me as being the Spenser book, at least to my memory, that had the closest connection to current events. It's not giving anything away to say that there's a Jeffrey Epstein type character in there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Um, Almost more reprehensible. There's a Ghislaine Maxwell character in there. Um, there are a lot of parallels. Was that sort of I mean, it was clearly a conscious decision to use that case. Was it a conscious decision to sort of connect to current events?
One of the things, and you and I have spoken about this before, the only thing that I was asked by the Parker family to do is to keep things contemporary. And that was kind of the broad note that I got. They thought the success of the series and the longevity of the series was that Bob always kept things current. And originally, one of my ideas is I wanted to go back in time, and I wanted to set some of the books in the 70s and the 80s. And I've written books that are historical novels, so I feel very comfortable writing about different time periods. But the second part of that, not only keeping it contemporary, but for me, being somebody that is a former newspaper reporter, I'm inspired by what's happening in the world. And I didn't necessarily seek out a story that was going to be on the minds of people, that was completely contemporary. But just when you heard anything about the Epstein story, it was so damn crazy, and mainly about the abuse of justice, and the way that justice took a long time coming for this guy, and how decades he was able to manipulate people in power with his money, and to have an district attorney in Florida, state attorney, completely turn a blind eye to his case. There were threats against police officers, even a police chief, where where the police chief had been investigating him. So the abuse of power was so huge that it just seemed like the perfect foe, perfect kind of story for Spenser, because we love, you know, you and I have always spoken about this. I never want to write a Spenser book, and I never will, that's just going to be a fun book because Spenser is in it, where it's just a run-of-the-mill murder story or something that you're not that interested in. My criteria is, would you read this book if Spenser was not in it? If this was a John Smith novel, if this was somebody else, or just a crime book, would this be something that I could write and sell and people would want to read? And for me, the Epstein story just had it all. And so I learned as much as I could about it. There was a terrific podcast that ABC News did that just great reporting. And then I tried to take all that, absorb it, and then forget all of it and tell my own version of an Epstein-like character who would be in Massachusetts. But it was interesting to me. It was just it's a hell of an interesting news story. It's a terrible story, but it's something that you can't quit listening to.
Yeah. I mean, and there is something viscerally pleasing about Spenser and Hawk. I mean, the higher the target, the bigger the target, the more fat cat the target. It is viscerally pleasurable to watch them take it down.
I mean, just the idea that I thought it's to think about Spenser and Hawk being in the same room with Jeffrey Epstein, who was so smug and so thought he was so insulated and that nobody could touch him. That just excited me to write the book right there.
Yeah. I know you've gotten this question before, but my audience hasn't necessarily heard your answer to it. So having touched on something as current events as the Epstein case, would you, I'm not saying do a novel about the pandemic, but at least sort of touch on it as being an influence on the world that you're writing about?
It's I write two different series right now. I write, of course, Spenser, but also write my own Quinn Colson books that are very much like Spenser, but very different in the fact that they're set in Mississippi and dealing with very Southern issues. And and have a much different kind of feel. I think in the Quinn Colson books, the pandemic is fair game because it's happening in real time. It is happening in the real world. We have things that are being affected by all kinds of, you can't write about the modern South without, and I read about politics as well, so you can't dismiss the idea of how Trumpism has affected the South and certain characters and politics. So I will have to include the pandemic in a future story for that. Spenser was a little bit of a fuzzier time frame. When does this happen? Did this happen 2 years ago? Did it happen four? When is this? I don't necessarily. I don't think the pandemic will ever crop up in one of my Spenser books.
Yeah, I think one of our earliest conversations came around the time of the Boston Marathon bombing,
Yeah,
and which was what, 2013, I think. And I remember asking you then, would you ever touch on that? And you said, I mean, it'll never be a plot point. And I think at one point in it, in one of the books after that, you made a reference to a place, but
yeah.
that was it. I mean, it acknowledged the existence of this thing that had happened.
I
But
can't remember. There was a restaurant that has since gone out of business, but it was right there on Boylston, and it's right where the bomb had gone off and had been really damaged and destroyed. And I just happened to be up there one night with a buddy of mine who's from Boston, and he said it's really important we go to this restaurant. It's them; they're finally coming back after the bombing, and we want to support them. And I ended up in that restaurant. Of course, anything like with Bob, is those things find their ways into the story.
yeah, one of the things I think is interesting, and for people who are watching this who have not read I mean, the Spenser novels are better known probably just because they've been around a lot longer than the Quinn Colson novels.
Sure,
They're both
sure.
really, really great series and incredibly different. But it seems to me that one of the things that they do have in common is wrestling with notions of basic moral and ethical questions, right? People have to make, and their protagonists do it in different ways because they're in different environments, and
Right.
they're different people. But I wonder, does that get, I don't know, more complicated at a time like now? Because I don't know, they're I'm dating myself here. It used to be that this was the moral. This on a moral question, you would say this is the right, this is right, and this is wrong.
Yeah.
And yet people don't necessarily think that way anymore. I mean, occasionally I'll
Well,
make a comment on Morning Newsbeat about, well, these guys better want to be on the right side of history. And I get emails saying, well, how do you know your side of history is the right side of history? Um, I don't know, because of how I was raised, I suppose. But I think, does
I
that
think
make
that's
it
the
harder?
important. I think it makes it easier. I think it makes it easier, and I think it makes these books more relevant. I think there was a time when I started writing the Quinn Colson books 10 or 12 years ago that I would talk about, hypocrisy and talk about racism, and these weren't necessarily, these were things that we've been discussing for years and years and years, and they have been, discussed in movies and books. But I find in times like these, characters like Spenser, characters like Quinn Colson, who obviously was very influenced by me reading Robert Parker. There would be no Quinn Colson without Robert Parker. Um, it's That's what makes these books relevant. Is I think that if I just had a character who was I call him, I have a kind of a crude name. I'll tell you off the air what I call him. But these books with the super macho military guy that's taking these people down. But if you don't have the character have a moral center, then what use is the book? What's the point of the book? And I think the longevity about a character like Spenser, where there are a million books with a tough guy with a gun, a million of them, is the reason Spenser has lasted. I think is his common decency, the code that he lives by, and that code these days has been fractured. It has been broken. It has been stepped upon, and I think that if you're reading a Spenser book and you don't, you think that this stuff is complicated. You're living in an alternate reality, and I think that's what's important about reading somebody like Spenser. Is It's no different from the old westerns. It's Gary Cooper walking down the street and doing the right thing as everyone's turning their back to him, and those kind of stories I think have more relevance now than ever before.
Yeah, fair. I think it's a good point. I think that, I mean, because we do seem to live in a world of situational morality and situational ethics, and certain things, and and for characters that are in fiction, certainly that are rooted in a code, for lack of a better word. Um, I guess that's true. They provide a certain certainty for the reader, as long as the reader, I guess, agrees with the code.
Yeah. And to me, I don't think it's debatable. I don't think the code is something where if you stand on this side or you vote this way or you have this thing, that's not, the code is pretty clear. I think when you really look at, hypocrisy, racism, political corruption, lying, fraud, conning others, that's bad. That's a bad thing. I don't think I'm taking a bold statement here or anything this is not subjective. And I think right now there's so much double speak and craziness and unethical behavior. It's just gone run amok. And again, I think that's why from the beginning of time we like to read about characters who are not only going to take down the bad guys, but also live their life with some kind of decency. And I think we need. I think that's the importance of fiction. That's the importance of writing these books.
Yeah. The and I'm going out of my way not to go too much into the plot of the book, because I hate to spoil it, and I hate it when people spoil it for me. But I do have a question that sort of, without talking about the plot, it seemed to me that one of the things I really liked about the book was that we sort of got a little bit of a glimpse into Hawk's world that has nothing to do with Spenser. And in the past, you might say, "Oh no, he's off fighting in some place in the Middle East," and somebody would say, "Well, that's good. I don't want to know more because it gives us deniability." But you wouldn't really know more than that. And this time we start to see a little bit more about Hawk in that sense. And tell me if I'm wrong. It struck me that the way you write Hawk, it seems like Hawk has a sense of an end to how he has traditionally lived his life, an end that Spenser doesn't see.
That's Hawk, a good point.
Is that, was that, I mean, to what degree, am I grabbing onto something there?
No, I think that's exactly right. And I don't think we're giving too much away. We find a little bit, the story winds its way to the Bahamas, and we find out that Hawk has a very strong connection to that area, and he has a very strong connection to one of the islands and the people there. And you do see, I think that there's always been that veil of secrecy with Hawk and where he goes and what he does that makes him interesting. And the reason why I would never book, I think that diminishes the character completely if we got too far into knowing his day in, day out life. But he is a guy.
By the way, the
Hawk
man
probably has invested his money very well.
I was going to say, that's why a Man Called Hawk's TV series didn't work. He's better as a mystery.
No, he is better than, and we don't know where he goes. I mean, many times, we've never been to Hawk's house. We don't see where he lives. Occasionally, Bob kind of would talk about or bring in, the girlfriend who he was seeing at the time or whatever. But, Hawk is a very guarded person. But yeah, I think that what I was trying to show is exactly what you're talking about. Hawk has a retirement plan. he knows where he's going to end up, and Hawk, yeah.
Yeah,
he's a good investor too.
Yeah, and he and Spenser are not going to be bouncers at the villages in Orlando. That's clearly
no. But I would read that book. I would like to see that. I think that could.
You may have to write that book for about 30 years.
There's.
Talk a little bit how you deal with the aging issue with Spenser. He's clearly about 55 to 60. That's sort of immutable, I suppose.
Well, again, it goes back to the thing that I was asked to by the Parker estate, which is, keep him contemporary. And in doing that, we had to do a little shift. I mean, kind of like the TV show. I don't know if you remember the TV show, but, early in the books from the 1970s, Spenser, Bob wrote a lot about how Spenser had served time in Korea, that he had been in the army in Korea. And then when the TV show came out in the 80s, he was a Vietnam veteran. And, the army thing has never been that important to Spenser anyway. It was just, part of his life, but it wasn't necessarily, who he was. But yeah, I think Spenser is, I always look at Spenser as he's about 10 years older than me. And Quinn Colson is 10 years younger than me. And that's how I keep track of it. So my Spenser is aging probably a little bit more than Bob allowed him to. When Bob passed away, Spenser, if you're, being very, really sticking to the books, I mean, Spenser was going to be in his 80s. He would be in his 90s by now. So just these little subtle adjustments to keep him realistically in the game, are important. But yeah, but the bad thing of it though, Kevin, is I'm now aging into being Spenser. And so, 10 years ago, it was kind of a lot of these things were theoretical when I'd write about Spenser having knee trouble or old football injuries or things like that. But now it's not funny anymore. None of this stuff's that funny.
Well, I do remember there was, and I think when I interviewed Parker, it was around this time, and it was around the time of Catskill Eagle, but I think it was the book before that, which I'm drawing a blank on. But there was a scene I remember he wrote where he for the first time he pulled out reading glasses. I remember that.
Yeah.
And
that may have been a valediction.
Yes, it was valediction, but he never did it again. It was he played with it a little bit and must have said, I don't like that. I'm not going there.
Yeah. But my Spenser, he wears reading glasses. He's probably, he's 60. And he's got some, also you think about all the things Spenser has been through, being shot, getting in fights, whatever. He's got some mileage on him. And
a new knee. Is that a knee replacement, right? I think. Yes.
He had some knee, yeah, he had some knee work done. Although I had somebody that's had a knee replacement tell me, he said, you don't ever want Spenser to have a complete knee replacement, maybe just a partial. But no, I like the idea that I'm writing an older Spenser, and he is a little older than Bob Spenser. I think Bob Spenser was perpetually, he could run 6 miles in the morning and come back and drink a 6-pack of beer and work out later with Hawk. But my Spenser, it's a little tougher for him to do that stuff.
So let me ask you a few quick questions to wrap this up. You have a new Quinn Colson coming out in July, The Heathens?
That's right. Yep, The Heathens will be out to be the 11th book.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, I hope we can do this again when that comes out.
Absolutely.
Quinn Colson TV series, is that still on track?
Well, we're very happy to announce this year that HBO has bought the rights to all the Quinn Colson books. And, I was hoping to be a little further along in the process about this time last year. There was actually a whole entire first season written. There was a game plan on the direction, how it was going to go. And it was very faithful. It was really a wonderful plan to be very faithful to the books and very faithful to the character. But then the pandemic happened and everything on cam. All the projects at HBO are backlogged. So unfortunately, I don't know where we are, where we're going to be. Hopefully we'll get some good news soon, but as it is right now with production shut down, we're just backlogged on so many shows. But I was hoping to be a little further ahead.
Had you cast it?
No, it has not been cast yet.
Okay. And then
I can tell you though, Kevin, it will not be Mark Wahlberg. I can't tell you that.
And that statement has so much subtext to it. It's unbelievable. Okay. Last question, having nothing to do with the books, but I know it's a subject that is close to your heart. What bourbon are you drinking these days?
What bourbon? I think the other night I did one of these Zoom calls a couple of weeks ago with Julian Van Winkle, who is the owner of Pappy Van Winkle Bourbon. And I was hoping that would end up with me getting a bottle of bourbon from Pappy Van Winkle, but that hasn't happened yet. So in the meantime, what I've had to, I'm a big fan of Four Roses. I like Four Roses very much. I think there's some great stuff. I like Jefferson. I got some Jefferson bourbon. I'm trying to think of anything else that is really, there's just so much great stuff. The only thing that I try to stay away from is there are a lot of bourbons being produced outside of Kentucky. And for me, if it is real true bourbon, it has to be made in Kentucky. And I don't know, it's just, to me, there's a different sense of the whole product. But I do love it. Without coffee and bourbon, none of these books would be possible.
Well, I was going to ask you, because my kids gave me 2 different bottles of bourbon. And I was going to ask you to rate them because you're the guy when it comes to this.
Yeah.
I hate to tell you, this one was made in New York. It's called Hudson. So I'm not even going to ask you to rate that one because you've established it.
I don't want to criticize your kids' gifts.
Larceny?
All bourbon is good.
Larceny?
I don't know that.
This is from Kentucky.
I think I is it?
By Old Fitzgerald Distillery, Bardstown, Kentucky.
Well, I would probably try the larceny.
Okay.
I think that's probably some good stuff. But any gifted bourbon is good bourbon. Let's face it. Let's not criticize any bourbon that someone gives you as a gift.
I totally, especially not my kids. Well, thank you for doing this. Once again, it's Robert B. Parker, Someone to Watch Over Me, in bookstores, independent bookstores. You do a lot of independent bookstore stuff, which I think is terrific. Also, obviously available on a certain big website that sells lots of books.
I've heard something about the place.
I appreciate you doing this. I hope we can do it again and maybe even catch up for a beer one of these days.
Hey, wouldn't that be fantastic? Sometime soon, maybe fall, maybe next year, and we'll have a drink in honor of Spenser and the late great Robert B. Parker.
Fingers crossed. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Enjoy it always. Take care.
Take care.